Do you know what I don't like the most about relationships? This is just me personally. It's conflict. Now, I love conflict in other people's lives. Like I love watching that drama. That's fun. But I don't want that drama in my life. I don't wish for it. I don't like it. Take me away from it. But Romans 12 talks about relationships, about this. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, and here's the key, I think, fix your attention on God. And this is really the secret, I think, to our relationships. It's not just trying to fix ourselves or fix our relationships, but it's keeping our attention on God, because He's the one that can change us from the inside out. And just for us to readily recognize what He wants from us and quickly respond to that. And unlike the culture around us, that's always dragging us down. You know, speaking of drama, there's so much drama on social media and just all around us. But God brings the best out of us. He develops well-formed maturity in us. And every week, I just want to bring a super practical message to you about one aspect of relationships. And today's topic is conflict. Hopefully resolving conflict. I know that can't always happen. In fact, you know, I'm the one who kind of wishes that there would never be any conflict. And I sometimes look at other couples, other families. I'm like, oh, they probably never have conflict in that family. There's probably never any drama. But I know, and you know, that in every relationship, we all have conflict. And I've learned just through studying this message and just thinking about it. So this message is really for me, probably more than you. But we're all going to have conflict. And I think sometimes, I think it can be a really good thing. And we're going to talk about that. So just hang with me a little bit there. You know, the Bible, I love the Bible. It's full of conflict. It's conflict between brothers, between siblings, between people, between nations, between people and God. Just the whole book is full of conflict. And we can learn what to do in conflict. We can also learn what not to do in conflict. And I want to show a couple passages to you. One will start in the New Testament, but also a story from the Old Testament. And maybe give some light on how conflict can actually help us. It can help our relationships. It can even build our relationships. So let's start by looking in Ephesians chapter 4. Be angry. Now, I like this. I like that it just says, hey, you can, like, it's almost like God saying, I know you're going to have emotions. I know you're going to be angry sometimes. Just do it. It's okay. It's okay to show that. And so let me just throw this point up here. If you're taking notes, you can write this down, that all relationships have conflict. And that's probably just really good for us to remember that everyone has conflict, that there's going to be times where we're angry or disappointed or upset or afraid or whatever about what someone thinks or what they're going to say or what am I going to say next. And that's just conflict. And you know, if you're just trying to get along, like in your marriage, and so when something that you think might be a little bit like conflicty comes up, and you're just going to ignore that, or worse, you're going to stuff it down, or worse, you're going to go silent, like those are all not good things for relationships. It's almost like when we see this conflict bubbling up, or when I'm afraid of what they're going to think or whatever, it's just good to realize that we can, there's ways to work through it, but that's the point, is that we need to work sometimes to get through that. And write this down, that extraordinary relationships have healthy conflict. Like we're all humans. We're all thinking in our heads different ways, and sometimes when we speak those things out loud, it's like, wait, what'd you just say? Well, was that to me? Are they mad at me? You know, all of a sudden things just bubble up. But there's ways to have healthy conflict, and that's what we want to talk about today. I think if you see conflict as a path to extraordinary relationships, that can change everything. That can change maybe your fear. If you're like me and you're a little bit afraid or don't want that drama, keep that away. If you're like that, you know, hopefully today you can see conflict in a positive light, that this doesn't have to be bad. In fact, I think sometimes, maybe you know this too, you have a friendship, and if you go through a little bit of some tough times, there's some bumps in that relationship, and once you get through those bumps, it almost seems like, hey, I can trust this person even more. Hey, our relationship's even better than it was before. And you would not have had that if it hadn't been for a little bit of conflict. So, Nathan, conflict's not bad. Conflict's not bad. The Bible shows us how. Here's that verse again. Be angry and do not sin. So there's a way to be angry and not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. And lastly, don't give an opportunity to the devil. Like, can you have conflict without sinning? Can you have like a heated exchange without sinning? Well, yes. Is it bad to let that go on indefinitely? That's true too. It is. Do we need to watch out that Satan doesn't use that conflict, like let it grow and build till it explodes? Yes, that's true too. And let me just break this down. When it says do not sin, I think this really means, healthy conflict is safe. And I think what I mean by that is that I'm not going to clam up. I'm not going to give you the silent treatment for 2 or 3 days. It's a safe place. Hey, if you're mad about something, if you're mad at me for something, I got to be careful because my wife's right here and she's kind of nodding and taking notes. But I'm never going to leave you. That's not even on the table. This is a safe place. And in fact, I'm going to listen. Like I'm going to lean into this. I'm not going to just run away, and I'm probably not that good at this. You can talk to Julie later about that. But I want to be the sort of person where, hey, if there's conflict, I'm not just walking away. I'm not turning my back on you. And it's hard, and maybe even I'm going to try to see things from that other person's point of view. I mean, these can be hard things. But, too many marriages, jobs, friendships are ruined because it's not a safe place. A safe relationship means that I'm gonna be here when this is resolved. I'm not giving up on you. Proverbs 15, verse 1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. We can give a gentle answer. We can make that a safe place. Hey, tell me more. Let's talk about this. And next, Ephesians says, don't let the sun go down on your anger, which to me means that there should be an end. Like your goal is that this isn't going to go on and fester, but there's going to be a stopping point. That's kind of our goal. I'm not going to, if I'm in a fight, I'm not just going to shut down and ignore them. I'm going to talk it through with them. And sometimes the best way to get through a conflict the quickest is to listen. Proverbs 18, listen before you answer. If you don't, y'all are stupid and insulting. I love the Bible. It just says it the way it is. I've taught some negotiation classes before, and it doesn't say it quite like this, but I like the idea of little, L-I-L. You want your conflict to be lil. You want to make sure that you're listening first. You want to be able to identify what it is that other person needs by listening. And then you want to label their emotion. Like you want to let them know that, even if you don't agree with them, that they do sound like it's frustrating, so that they know that you've been listening. And, men, this is, if you want a 30-second, real quick lesson on negotiation, just remember, when you come home and things don't seem good with your wife, just listen. Like, you don't need to fix it right away. Just listen. And it's called active listening. It's when you're kind of nodding, you're making some eye contact. Maybe once in a while you're asking a follow-up question. But it's never the sort of thing where, oh, I hear you saying, because then it's about you again. Just say, oh, so they really, they broke your whatever. They offended you. And once you think that you know what the problem is, and what they need, then you can try to identify that and just say it out loud. Like, oh, they really called you a bad name. And if they say, no, that's not it, then just keep listening. Keep listening until you can really identify what the problem is, what they need. And once you've identified that, then you can say, oh man, that sounds really hurtful. Like, you get it. You may be thinking in your head, well, she could have de-escalated that earlier. But you don't say that, right? You say, oh, that sounds really frustrating. You're just identifying their emotion. And we're trying to keep it little. We're not going to get rid of conflict. But in fact, in an instance like that, where I was listening, and I was identifying, and I was labeling, all of a sudden, she was able to realize, kind of talk things out, even just to herself. I didn't have to try to fix anyone in this instance. I'm just listening. And if we do that, you're not going to be stupid or insulting. You'll be smart and encouraging. So listen, identify, and label, because our goal is to keep it little. And that's related to this last warning, to give no opportunity to the devil. Healthy conflict is resolved. We don't just let it fester, and we don't bring it back up. So ladies, this is maybe a little bit more for you. We don't take past conflicts and bring it up later for ammunition, okay? Like, if it's been settled or forgiven or talked through, we don't have to bring that up later. I think if we can keep it safe, if we can keep it little and get it resolved, that will change our relationships. Like, you'll probably find that work relationships are even better. There's going to be conflict at work, but if you can listen and work through it, your relationship and the way that they see you is going to be improved at the end of that. Same in marriages, same everywhere. 2 Corinthians says, finally, brothers and sisters, rejoice, strive. Like, it takes work to do this. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of work. Strive for restoration. Encourage one another. Be of one mind. Live in peace. And if you do that, there's a promise at the end. If we do these things and work through conflict, there's a promise that the God of love and peace will be with you. He's going to be with you. That's an awesome promise. These are things that I want to do in my life. I want to strive and encourage and work towards unity and resolution, because I want God with me. Like, I want him blessing me. I want him guiding me. I need that in my life. So everything I've said so far, if you're taking notes, these are the best notes you've ever taken in your life. Yes. I mean, these are genius words. I should just, amen. Let's go home. But we can do this. We can try this. And a lot of times, it won't work. Sometimes it won't work, because we can only control ourselves. We can listen. We can identify, like, we can go through the steps and take the time. We can work hard. We can strive. But it doesn't always work for the other person. They may not know this. They may harbor ill will and hard feelings, and they may never give it up. And here's the one thing that I can say to you, is that it all starts in the heart. Like, it's for you and me, it has to start on the inside. It's not just a list of things that I do. It's not just hey, I'm going to do this, and then they're going to do this, because that hardly ever works the way we think it will. But it really has to start deep inside of our heart. I want to show a story here from Genesis chapter 50. And you probably know the story of Joseph. He's with the coat of many colors, and his brothers were angry. They were jealous of him, and they actually sold him into slavery. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your brothers selling you into slavery? And then when he was in Egypt, his boss there threw him into prison, trumped up charges, wasn't true. When he was in prison then for a few years, even his fellow prisoners, like, they got out and they forgot about him. Like it seemed like every step of the way he was trying to do the right thing and live at peace with people, but it didn't work out. And here at the end of their dad's life, and you know the rest of the story, right? Like he got out of prison and he became like number 2 in all of Egypt, and he saved, because God gave him wisdom and was with him, he saved the Egyptians, and he saved his family from starvation. Like his life changed completely. But at the end of his dad's life, like his whole family was there. Their father's dead, and Joseph's brothers were afraid. Why were they afraid? Well, they said, now Joseph will show his anger, and he's going to pay us back. Because they're probably thinking that's what we would do in his place. I mean, we sold him into slavery, and it's terrible. We did wrong to him. And like, how would you have acted? Seriously, how would you have acted if your brothers, if your family had done all that to you? That would have been hard. Like that would have been stuff that I wouldn't have. I would have wanted justice in that. Well, here's what Joseph did. Is that Joseph replied, and I just want to stop here. We'll see the rest of the verse. Joseph's the one in power now. Joseph's the only one that can fix this relationship. He was the one that was hurt. He was the one that was sold into slavery. He was the one that got the raw end of the deal. Like this, and he's the only one that can actually make it right. Just remember that. This happened to Joseph. That sometimes when we're the ones that are wronged, we're the only ones that can actually make it right. You following along? Do you understand here? Look at this carefully. Joseph replied, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you?" Like Joseph had a correct understanding of who was really in charge of making things right and of punishing people. I know sometimes, this is stupid, I know, but my kids will do something. They'll break something or leave a stain, and the first question I ask is, why did you do that? Like they're going to know. Like they're going to be, oh, I planned it out, and sometimes maybe they did. But, and I want them to somehow pay for that emotionally or whatever. And a lot of times it's an accident, but that's my first thing is I want to bring that punishment. And maybe that's okay for a parent, but when we're talking about adults, God is the one who makes things right. He's the one that punishes. It's not my job. It's not your job. So here's the first lesson from Joseph's life, if you're taking notes here, is that it starts on the inside. I'm going to take ownership of this. Yes, I'm the one that was wronged, but I'm going to be the one, I'm going to change my heart. I'm going to be the one that makes the big decision here, and I don't take revenge. You can read all the books on negotiation, do these tips that I told you, and sometimes they won't work out. Like sometimes we're left there with years where we kind of wish that things were different, had gone different. And Jesus knew that this was a heart issue. And he told his followers, like he was talking to Christians in the Sermon on the Mount. And he says this story. You probably have heard this. He says, "Why do you look at that speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, but you don't pay any attention to the plank in your own eye?" And that's what we do. Like I'll notice the smallest offense. Someone might say something. I'm like, they shouldn't have said that. I'm mad now. And yet I can turn around, I might say that same thing to someone else. Like I'm not perfect at all. In fact, I think the point of Jesus saying this is that, hey, why are you worried about someone else's issues, the things they say to you, the way they offend you? When you've actually offended, Nathan, you've actually offended the God of the universe. Like you've sinned against him. And the punishment for that is death. How dare you even look at someone else's life and tell them where they need to get off? And Jesus says this. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? And then Jesus says this, he's saying this to Christians, to me, to you. You hypocrite. Like, ouch. That hurts. That hurts. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly enough to remove the speck from your brother's eye. This is funny to me, because when I think about it, and I think about that plank in my eye, like the payment for that, for me offending the God of the universe, should have been death for me. And the way that gets fixed is that God sends his son Jesus to die on the cross, to be raised again, to fix that for me. So once I realize how to get this plank out of my eye, you know, I look very differently at other people now. Like, okay, you're angry this morning, I get it, or you've got an issue, or you called me a name. Must be something wrong in your life. Sorry about that. It changes me. I've been forgiven so much that thing that's going on in someone else's life at work or in my family seems pretty small about now. Here's what Joseph did in his story. Joseph actually had 2 kids, and look at this. He named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it's because God has made me forget all of my troubles. Like, he did that, if you do this, then this. He did that whole forgiving thing and just made peace with his brothers, even if they hadn't made peace with him. He just did that. He took that step, and God was with him then. God made life for him, so he forgot all his troubles. And his second son, this is kind of funny, he named Ephraim and said, it's because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Like, God has taken this bad thing. I was offended. I was hurt. And God just turned it around. And I love this. Maybe you're going through something right now, and you don't know why, and it's painful and it's hurtful. I think God can turn it around. Like, I think God can actually make your life even better than it was by going through it, by working through conflict the right way. He wasn't going to get back at them. He says this. He says this to his brothers. He says, hey, you intended harm for me. And I kind of like this. This is the second lesson, is that we don't sweep it under. You know, someone comes and says something, we don't say, oh, it's okay. It didn't hurt me that bad. But say, yeah, that hurt me. Just be honest. That was painful. Don't try to cover it up. Joseph goes one step further, and he points this to God. You intended this to harm me, but God intended it for good. And this is amazing. This takes a lot of faith. I think it takes an amazing amount of faith. God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And this is number 3, is that it requires a very secure faith. Not a mamsy-pamsy faith, not a little faith. But when we're hurt, and we need to work through that conflict, and it's not working out the way we thought it would, sometimes it just takes faith that God's going to work it out for us. That God's going to, and not just like smooth things over, but God's going to give us a purpose. Like for Joseph, he went on to save people. Millions of people. God gave him a purpose. There's a purpose in your pain, in the suffering, in the relationship, in the conflict that you're going through right now. There's a purpose. I love Romans 8:28. You know this. And we know that in all things, say all things, in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. We don't always see the big picture. But guess who does? God does. God knows what's going on, and we can trust him. God doesn't want us to go through pain. It doesn't give him joy to see us go through suffering. But he knows that he can turn that around. And we need to know, we need to go into these conflicts and these issues just knowing that God's at work. He's going to turn it around. The last lesson comes from verse 21. Joseph says, so then don't be afraid. Guys, I'm going to provide for you and your children. I'm going to bless you. He speaks kindly to them. Well, let me show you the point here. You can write it down. Is that if we do conflict the way the Bible teaches us to do conflict, it sets us free. It sets us free to bless people. It sets us free to pray for them. And I want to be real careful here. It doesn't mean that you have to trust this person. It doesn't mean that you have to, oh, you're my best friend now. Yeah, you can come over anytime. This is great. There's something called boundaries, and that's wisdom. It takes time to rebuild those relationships, and that's okay. But you know what you can do? You can still pray for them. You can pray for their kids. You can ask God to bless them. This is God's way. God's way of using conflict in our lives to change us, to give us an opportunity to show faith, to give us a chance, if it's possible, to make that relationship better than it was, and to give a purpose to our lives, to give us something that otherwise we never would have thought of doing or couldn't have done. Whether that's praying for someone who's hurt you, or blessing them, forgiving them. God's at work, and He has a purpose for you.